Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at Riderflex. We hope you enjoy today's podcast. And as a reminder, please subscribe to the Riderflex show for updates on new episodes. And by the way, if you haven't already, check out the book we recently launched, The Riderflex Guide, Inspiring and Hiring, available for purchase on Amazon. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
Andy Brusman on the Riderflex podcast. Hello, Andy. Good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
You're in North Carolina, I think. Is that right?
Charleston, South Carolina. So a little further down the coast.
That's right. Charleston. Sorry, Charleston. Charleston's a cool little town. I have, what's the main street there where all the little historic bars and restaurants are? What is that? It's not Main, but what street?
Yeah, you've got, King Street, but
King Street.
The entire historic district down there has more restaurants and bars. It would take you well over a week to hit every single one.
I have been obliterated a few times on King Street in my life, just so you know. Hey, before we get into business, give us the personal Andy stuff, family, mom, dad, siblings, where you grew up, all that good stuff, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So native of Northern New Jersey, but haven't been back since 1992 when I got out of college. Went to Lynchburg College, where I played tennis for a couple of years. Lived in Virginia for 20 years, I guess, prior to moving to Charleston. Okay. Been married over 25 years, have 2 boys. My son Campbell is up at Dickinson College playing baseball. And my younger son, Aiden, is a sophomore in high school, also a baseball player. So we are a passionate baseball family, huge Yankees fan. So this has been a very difficult week for me after the Houston debacle. Still have family up in Virginia with my sister, my parents in Williamsburg, but have been in Charleston for a little over 10 years. We ended up here. I love telling this story. It was a Friday night in Richmond, Virginia in February, almost 11 years ago. It was raining and snowing and sleeting. And I looked at my wife and said, let's move to Charleston now. And 4 months later, the moving truck showed up.
How about
that? We definitely have a bit of a spontaneous streak in us, I guess. But, just turned 52 and love living down here.
Interesting, your accent, right? You're a Jersey kid, but the whole Richmond, the Charleston, which is definitely a slower draw, so to speak, and especially Richmond. I'm amazed how you can go from Washington, D.C. to Richmond, and it's a totally different sound.
2 different worlds, yeah.
But your accent has been blended, right? You put it in a little blender, and now it's all mixed up, and so you still got a little Jersey speed, but it's slowed down a little because of where you live.
Yeah, it's definitely become a little bit more neutral, although the Jersey will probably come out at times when I'm frustrated or not happy about something. So I've been in the South, more than half my life. So
yeah. Very really good. And so you had one sister, I think, right? One sibling. What'd your folks do? What'd your parents do?
So my mom was a stay-at-home, so watched my sister and I. My dad was an entrepreneur, definitely where I got, I think my entrepreneurial urge, I guess. So he had a business that sold sales presentation aids. So the easiest way to describe it is when a pharmaceutical company was rolling out a new drug, they needed, folders and all different sorts of products to roll out to their sales force. My dad is the one that would get all that for them.
Interesting. Okay. Did he have several businesses and lots of other investments, or that was his primary thing?
That was the primary one. I mean, he made the decision. He was working for a larger company and felt like there was a better opportunity for him to roll out on his own. And he set up a desk at our home and started cold calling. And this is right in the middle of when we were, I was in private school. My sister was on her way, and definitely took some risk, but it was absolutely the right thing for him to do.
How about that? Okay, very good. Is he not with us anymore, or is he still around?
Mom and dad are both in their mid-80s, and doing great, still playing golf. I mean, they're just doing fantastic. We're very fortunate.
That's great. Where do they live?
Williamsburg, Virginia, although
Okay.
we're in the process of kind of hopefully downsizing and having them relocate either to Richmond near my sister or down here in Charleston.
And you and your sister are gonna flip a coin to see which way they go?
I mean, my guess is Richmond. My sister's kids are a little bit younger, so they'll have a chance to kind of see them grow. But we see them all the time, and we're in Richmond. It's kind of a stopping off point when we head up to Dickinson, so we get to see family and friends whenever we go through.
Okay. So your dad was a major influence on your life from a business perspective. Was he tough? Was he kind of a tough character? I'm guessing he was born in late 30s, early 40s, something like that.
Yeah, so I mean, no. And it's interesting to think about generations. So when my dad was growing up, his parents never went to watch anything he did, whether it was swimming or sports. And then it was the exact opposite with my sister and I and all the sports that we played. They didn't miss a thing. I mean, they were always there. I mean, driving us all over the place. My sister, she played soccer in college, so all the travel soccer. I played tennis, traveled all over the place for that. And honestly, I mean, you just couldn't have had, more supportive, encouraging parents. And it's definitely, influenced how my wife, Chris, and I think interact with our boys. And it's the same thing. I mean, we love traveling all over the place with them and supporting them with what they're trying to achieve with their baseball and academics.
That's pretty cool. I mean, that's definitely not normal. Most of those guys born in the late 30s, early 40s were pretty hardcore. So it's great that he saw how his parents were, and he's like, okay, I'm not gonna be like that.
Yeah, polar opposite.
That's pretty cool. All right, very good. Athletic family. 2 boys playing baseball. One is what division is that in college he's playing?
So it's Division III, up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Dickinson's 240-year-old school. Academics are phenomenal. He actually started at the Citadel. He went to the Citadel here in Charleston, a military school.
Oh, okay.
Went to play baseball, but it wasn't the right fit. So when we looked at transferring, the focus was on high academic Division III, and we couldn't be happier with what he has found, both with the baseball program. The academics are incredible, so it's worked out brilliantly.
Yeah, Division III schools, traditionally those private division. I mean, the education is phenomenal, for sure. Now, were you pretty surprised? Because I can relate this to a personal story. Even though your kid in high school was probably dominant, I'm guessing if he's playing college ball when he was in high school, he definitely was good. When he got to college, were you like, oh shit, okay, everybody here is good. Everybody's good here.
So Campbell, my older one, was a late bloomer, to be honest with you. And it was very late in the process where he was, given an opportunity to come out and try. And candidly, he was at the lower end of the roster. I mean, I don't care if you're, any Division I program is going to have guys that can play. And he probably was in a little bit over his head a little bit. And so the reality is, I mean, there aren't huge differences outside of the Power 5 between Division I and Division III programs. Where there's a difference is depth. But when you put your starting guys up, they can compete. And, Dickinson is, I mean, they're in one of the toughest conferences in the country. And I mean, the beauty of this is they're having fun. I mean, I can tell you that most kids on Division III programs are enjoying it a lot more than the kids on D1 programs.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you get to watch online? Do they stream stuff so you can watch from home?
They do, but the camera angle's awful. So
is it?
So we'll travel a little bit. I'll head down to Florida over their spring break and spend the week down there watching them. And we'll head up to Dickinson a couple of times also. I don't mind getting in the car, and it's a 14-hour drive, 14-hour drive. So it's a lot of phone calls on the road for me.
That's great. The fact that you spend so much time with the kids going to their sports, it really means a lot. It does mean a lot. I don't think they don't realize it when they're 16, 17, 18, but when they get to be 25, 30 years old, they're going to reflect back and go, damn, my dad was there almost every game. Like it really does mean a lot to them. And I did the same. I was fortunate enough, blessed enough to be able to do that with my own schedule. And I always encourage the people that work here at Riderflex, with our team, I always tell them, I'm like, look, if you got a baseball game at 3:00, you need to go, because
Yeah.
this is a tiny window of time for you and your children and most of them will not play college sports. Right. So
Sure.
it's like, look, you got the sophomore, junior, senior year, like you got a 3-year period. You better go to every game, because once it's over, you can't go back. This is not a
Yeah.
movie. You can't rewind it and do this again. Like once it's done, it's done. So invest the time. I love the fact you're doing that.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've got 3, maybe 4 years because of extra year of eligibility for him, for my older son. And I've got 3 more years of high school, and then, hopefully 4 years of college ball. So
That's great.
I love every minute of it.
Now, so you went to a great high school, and then you went to Lynchburg. Were you a straight A student? Were you a rebel? Were you somewhere in the middle? Did you party a little? Did you get in any trouble?
So I was as far from a straight A student as you could possibly get. I did very well in the courses that interested me.
Okay.
When I went to school, I thought I'd be an English major, quickly decided that's not what I wanted, and ended up majoring in communications.
Okay.
Again, not knowing what career path I wanted, but I figured if I can come out of here and effectively communicate, whether it be large audience, one-on-one, it's going to apply to anything that I wanted to do. I was an entrepreneur growing up. So when I was in 6th grade, we would have a snowstorm come through, and I was up at 6 a.m. on the phone, lining up jobs to go shovel. Dad bought a snowblower for us to use, so it increased what we were able to do.
Nice.
Started car detailing company, during my summer year. So I was always, I think, more inclined to probably to work and start things, which has certainly followed me through my career.
Mm-hmm.
And look, I had a good time in college. Some of my greatest friends, to this day, I met them at Lynchburg College, and it was a long time ago, but it was a lot of fun.
Wasn't college? We're almost the same age. I'm 55. College was a lot of fun. Recently, I did the not the 23, whatever. We send your DNA in. I did what was it? Ancestry. Ancestry. Yeah, and it's a long story. I was trying to figure out who my real blood father was, which is another whole podcast episode. But so I did it for that, right? But later on, like weeks later and months later, I started thinking, oh man, like what if there's a kid out there somewhere?
Yeah, the old oops.
Yeah. Man, I don't know. Maybe I didn't want to do that. Anyway. Okay, very good. So good time. All right. So you get out of school. Walk us through, you don't have to touch every, piece of your career, but kind of walk us through the path to Towne Holdings, and then we'll get into that. But walk us through some of your early career.
So coming out of school, I don't know why I got locked in on this, but I suddenly became very focused on wealth management. And the more that I was told that I would never get hired coming directly out of school, the more determined I was to break into the industry. And so, I applied everywhere. I would go, I went to a wedding in Greenville, and I stayed Sunday night to be able to walk into the Morgan Stanley office on Monday. This was the second semester of my senior year. I would go down. There was a firm called Scott & Stringfellow in Richmond, Virginia, based in Richmond, Virginia, but had an office in Lynchburg. And I would just go and sit in the office just to watch and see what they were doing. And I was turned down by Scott & Stringfellow. I was turned down by everybody. I still have the letter from Scott & Stringfellow turning me down. And through persistence, ultimately, they ended up hiring me in the Lynchburg office, which was kind of unheard of. They just weren't hiring college-age kids. Eventually transferred to Richmond. And at this time, this is early 90s, so no cell phones, really, no computers. I was a rookie broker from New Jersey, sitting in the bullpen in Richmond, Virginia, at a 100-year-old wealth firm. It was just picking the phone up and dialing numbers, cold calling. It ultimately led to the ability to just have no fear to reach out and communicate with somebody. And you had to be really resourceful. One story I love sharing, we were we were doing an IPO for a community bank up in Northern Virginia, so about 2 hours north of us. And keep in mind, we had offices in Northern Virginia. So I'm looking through the prospectus. I have no clients, and I'm reading the bios of the board members. So I said, why don't I just call the board members and ask them for referrals?
Okay, good idea.
Called every single board member. I had them reading out of their Rolodex. If the total offering, Steve, was, let's call it 400,000 shares, I believe I did 170,000 shares of it. And
wow.
it just took, my career took off from there.
How about that?
And with a really big focus on community banking. But it flashed forward, I eventually, they allowed me to open an office. I was probably the youngest branch manager in the history of the firm.
Nice.
At 28 years old, I was recruiting brokers, and I just really, at that point, did not like what I was doing anymore.
Why?
I didn't feel like, I felt like it was a transaction. I didn't feel like I was really building anything.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
And so it started me, kind of on a path moving toward, more, let's call it alternative investments, investment banking, private equity. In 1998, I started an internet company called netgolfshop.com.
Really? Okay.
One of my best friends from college or from high school. And this is where we were going in and putting kiosks on the floors of green grass golf shops to carry virtual inventory to complement what they had already on their floor.
All right.
People said, man, this is a really good idea. It expands what they could sell. We ended up getting caught in the kind of the internet crash of 99, 2000. What ultimately would have been the demise of the business was that every kiosk was running on dial-up. So if you weren't actively using the kiosk in 3 or 4 minutes, it would go offline. So, again, thinking back to, this is a long time ago, but that ultimately would have been what would have killed us. So, I went back on my path, and from that point forward, we had our son Campbell, and I quit a job at Merrill Lynch 6 weeks after he was born and launched a firm called West Ham Capital Partners, which was a private equity focused firm. I referenced my dad earlier when I was in private school and everything that he had going on, and making the decision to just pick up and go start his own thing. It was a very similar process for me. So
that was the first time, besides the other little business you had there, Winston Partners was the your first gig. Was that just your business? Did you have a co-founder, partners? Okay.
So Winston Partners was a private equity and hedge funded funds firm. Started by 2 UVA classmates, Scott Andrews and Marvin Bush.
Okay.
So it was a short stint there because I went and started the internet company after that. But
I see. Marvin
Bush, hands down, had maybe the biggest impact on me professionally that anyone has ever had. And as I'm sitting here, I have a handwritten note from him that came to me that still sits right next to me that I look at every day. And
I like it.
It was Marvin is really the one that taught me how to build and nurture relationships. And to this day, every single day, there's something that I probably learned from him that I'm applying to what I do.
That's excellent. That's great. It's nice of you to mention him. Okay, very good. So you then walk us through a little bit more. You spent 9 years somewhere. Where did you, the longest stint you had, where was that? 9 years.
So it would have been West Ham Capital.
Yeah, that's right. Okay.
And so West Ham, so what we were doing is we were partnering with non-competitive private equity groups, and we were overseeing the deal sourcing for them. Okay. And then we would put, once we identified deals that they would lead, we would put co-investment vehicles together.
I see.
So had a partner there that he ended up kind of transitioning out, and it was around that point that we decided, not too long after, to pick up and relocate down to Charleston. It was also around this time that I made the decision that I wanted to focus on sports media and entertainment. I had built a lot of contacts up and a network there, and to a certain degree, it was almost like I was starting my career over at the age of, probably 39. Okay. But it was where my passion was. And, I felt like it was the right place for me to focus. And, I went through a period, we started a little firm in Richmond that was basically merged into Courtview Capital, which was a portfolio company of Warburg Pincus. That basically Courtview kind of blew up.
Okay.
And it was right after that I moved to Charleston and ultimately started a investment banking firm called Alchemy Global, which was an investment banking firm focused exclusively on sports media and entertainment, and with an eye more toward earlier stage companies. So did that for probably close to 4 years. I'd say one of the highlights of that was a deal that we did with Adidas over in Germany. We represented a company that called Storelli that makes protective apparel for soccer.
Okay.
So,
All right.
we were at the headquarters of Adidas in the boardroom with their CEO, board members. It was a really amazing experience, and they ended up investing in the company. But it also became, for me, and you can see, I mean, I'm not afraid to look at something, make an assessment, and make a decision. And for me at Alchemy, it was being an advisor and a banker to early stage companies was just a shitty place to be. You're adversarial with funding sources because they don't like the idea of money not going into a company to help growth. They hate the idea that you got to go and pay fees. And so it just felt like everything was adversarial. And so that's when I finally said, you know what, this isn't working anymore. I don't like it. I don't want to do this anymore. And we wound it down, but key thing was we kept the broker dealer.
Okay. So what I love about your career so far is that you are not afraid to pivot and make changes and close something up or do something different. Like if you don't like it, it's just a great tip for the listeners, right? If you're not doing something you really enjoy, then just do something different. Like stop, make a move. In the recruiting business, for a living, I talk to candidates, right? Besides the podcast. And I can't tell you how many people are miserable in their jobs. And they're always, well, I'm afraid, if I make a move, what if I quit? And I got, the other job, I'm like, man, life is too short to do something you don't want to do. Like you really need to be happy with what you're doing. And I love the fact that you're like that. You've been like that from the beginning. You're like, look, I'm going to do this. If it's fun, if I'm having fun, great. If I'm not, it doesn't matter whether I'm making money or not. I want to have a good time. I love that.
Yeah. And early on you certainly could look at my career path and say like, oh my God, you went from here to here to here to here. And I, at the time, that's probably the case, right? But for me, a book that I love is called True North, and it's really about following kind of your inner compass. And for me, my compass was not pointing in the right direction at those times.
I love it. Yeah.
I learned something from every single stop. One of the things that I learned is I'm a shitty employee.
Most entrepreneurs are.
Yeah, so I finally looked at it and said, look, I can, embrace who I am. I mean, this is probably in my late 30s. And, for me, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm someone that also likes being involved in, multiple different projects or deals or companies. And so I think the biggest thing that I did was I embraced it. And I said, this is who I am.
Great.
And so, as I understand who I am, I understand who I'm not. And how do I learn from both of those pieces as I, continue throughout my career?
I was a little later than you. I was probably mid to late 40s before I really got completely comfortable with who I was, what my strengths were, what my weaknesses were, and became very relaxed in talking about my weaknesses, and now at mid 50s, I'm like, look, I'll tell you what I'm great at. I'll tell you what I suck at. I have no problem talking. I'm not going to try to hide anything. I'm not going to try to fake anything. I'm not going to try to pretend like I'm somebody different. Here's what I do well. Here's what I don't do well. It's a
and you surround. And then you start to identify and surround yourself with people.
Yes.
That are going to be, complementary, kind of the yin to your yang, right? And it makes life so much. Look, life's not easy, but it's certainly when you're allowed to focus on the things that, again, you're passionate about and that you do well, and you're aligned with people that can support that. It makes working in life a hell of a lot easier.
It really does. Or surround yourself with people that complement your skill sets and people that you enjoy being
Bingo.
around. I mean, that's another one. I talk to early stage founders and startup entrepreneurs all the time on the podcast. And, they'll tell me things like, well, I'm going to this conference because I need to find a co-founder. And I'm always like, oh God, okay. First of all, you really need to partner with somebody, somebody you like, somebody you can hang around, because you're going to get to know their families.
Yep.
You're going to go to dinner. Everything. And it's important. Skill set is important, but you got to enjoy the person, and you got to connect with them on so many levels, especially in a small startup situation, because you're going to almost live with the person pretty much. I think it's critical. And that's one of the things I love about Riderflex, just the people, right? My partner, Scott, my co-founder, I trust that guy with my life, right? Plus we just enjoy hanging out. Like we can go for beers and talk about whatever, like if my wife's getting on my nerves that week, I can talk to him about it. Sorry, honey.
Well, it comes down to, you've got to have that person or people that, allows you to not have to go through, the severe highs and the severe lows. And sometimes I gotta be pulled back. And sometimes, with my colleagues, I need to push them forward a little bit. So again, it's that very complimentary, that the time you need it is when, maybe me pushing helps or them pulling back helps. But you're right, you're closer than a family member in many cases.
Absolutely. All right. So Towne Holdings started in 2018. By the way, just for the listeners, real quick, it is charlestownholdings.com. Also, I want to make sure that Andy Brusman is also on LinkedIn. You can connect with him there. Give us the scoop. You started it in 2018. How'd you start it? Do you have any co-founders? Then just give us the overview. Go for it.
So I mentioned earlier, Alchemy Global, wound that down, kept the broker dealer. I'll come back to that in a second. I decided at that point, while I was still doing work in sports media and entertainment, that I was going to get to know the Charleston region.
Okay.
My entire career was outside of Charleston. And so I set out to really, go and meet with a lot of different professionals and people here in the Charleston market. And it was during the course of this and getting to know people, I got a phone call from Mike Sanderson. I had gotten to know Mike on a deal. We were helping him raise money for a business that he started called bonds.com. So this is back when I was at Courtview. And Mike called and said, I'm moving to Charleston from Connecticut, and want to find out what's going on down there. I want to get involved in something.
Okay.
So Mike came down, and the head of our broker dealer, Scott Alario, and I met Mike at a gas station, basically on Daniel Island. And it was there that we said, look, we've got a broker dealer. One of the things that I was noticing as I was networking in Charleston is I identified a number of investment bankers in Charleston that were here still in the heart of their career, but there was no hometown firm. There was no real firm headquartered in Charleston. And so at that point, late 2018, Mike Scott and I said, look, we have the broker dealer. Let's launch an investment banking firm that is headquartered in Charleston. At the time, we thought we would be a niche Southeastern focused investment banking firm. And there were three pillars that we wanted to build Charlestown on. It was going to be built around teamwork, collaboration, and most importantly, the no asshole rule. So if you take those three, that eliminates about 98% of the investment bankers out there, because it is a very sharp elbowed, focus on me type industry.
Yeah.
We launched, I'm going to say, with about 11 people. And then over the course of through 2019 and 20, what I guess I didn't expect was those three pillars would be attractive to people outside of the Charleston market. And if you flash forward to today, we're close to 30 professionals. Great. All over the country. There's only about 7 of us here in Charleston. And we've got a unique mix of very senior level operating people, so former C-level individuals, complemented by a core team of what I call true investment bankers. And, we're doing deals 10 to 100 million, kind of an average, sell side, private placements, and we are multiple industries. I still focus on sports media and entertainment, but we've done deals all over the number of verticals.
An office there in Charleston, and then everybody else is remote, or what are you doing, or 100% remote?
It's 100% remote. COVID hit, and we were in an office building downtown called the Cigar Factory. Really, really, popular location. You've got easy access part. And when shutdowns went on, I knew that even with lockdowns, somebody was going to want our office, and we were able to get out of it pretty quickly.
Yeah, great move. Great move. The managing directors, are they, I don't know how this works. Forgive this ignorant question. Are they employees, or are they 1099 contractor? How does that work?
Yeah, everything's 1099.
Yeah.
With us. So, they're licensed. The investment bankers are licensed with our broker dealer.
Okay.
And so, most of them, this is all that they do. There's some that might have maybe some investments and some other things that they'll also focus on, but the core team, this is what they wake up and do every day.
Yeah. Now you're big enough though, where you're basically in management. You're back in management now, pretty much. I don't know if you're still doing some deals yourself, but you got a big enough team and a big enough company where you're dealing with running a company, which is, a lot of people management. Are you happy with that? Are you happy with what you're doing day to day now?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I made the conscious decision to not lead any deals about a year ago.
Okay.
And look, I was never classically trained as an investment banker. Flashback to the late 90s at Winston Partners, I was having to have one of the private equity guys explain to me what EBITDA was. I had no clue. So I never had the classic, analyst training going through everything. And so I'm fortunate that Mike Sanderson and Scott Alario, they're able to handle a lot of the internal pieces with the firm, running the broker dealer, the operations and everything else, and lets me focus on rainmaking, quite frankly. So sourcing deals. Nothing I love more than being able to source deals and hand them off to investment bankers. I focus on identifying talent, to bring on board, relationships with buyers and investors. I spend a lot of time in London, and so we'll be spending more time over there as well, working with private equity groups that need a firm like ours to help portfolio companies come over into the US. So that's a major growth area for us. So I'm getting to do the things that I enjoy, and am very fortunate that Mike and Scott can handle the stuff that would drive me absolutely crazy.
We run our companies very similar, my friend. I do the same thing. I'm the rainmaker, and I have about 30 recruiters now, and I'll still get involved a little bit with the recruiting, but yeah, I got people that can do that, which is great. So we're very similar. Let me ask you this. Do you enjoy, if you had to force rank, do you enjoy talking to billionaires that want to invest more, or do you like the visiting with a company founders that you're looking to invest in and diving into that and deciding whether or not they're a good investment, if you had to force rank it?
I'd say definitely the companies.
Okay.
We operate in a world where, we will interact with some family offices. It's a very unique set of investors and perspectives, some good, some bad. But, at the end of the day, I really enjoy the company and thinking about the pathways that we can help create to find the right investment partner for them, or the right buyer for them. That to me is the most exciting part of what we do. The negotiations and stuff like that, it's fine. We've had our share of butting heads with, groups as big as KKR to others, but it's definitely working with the entrepreneurs and understanding the business that I think is the most interesting.
Do most deals fall apart because of personalities and egos, or because the math just doesn't work?
It's a combination. And so it's actually a good question, and kind of segues into something that we started doing last year. I mentioned we've got, 8 or 9 of these very senior level operating people, which is, so they'll do advisory work for companies, outsource CEO, CFO. So I started putting them on teams on investment banking deals, which was kind of unheard of. And the role that ultimately was created was CEO whisperer, because
I like it.
That individual is the only one that our client, the CEO, can relate to, right? So
a lonely world, lonely job.
So the psychological aspect of going through a transaction, to have someone who's a fellow operator who has also been through a process that can play that psychologist role, it has saved some deals from blowing up and closing. And it's actually gotten us the mandate on some deals because it's such a unique approach. No one else is doing it. So yeah, we try to think creatively in this business, which it's not a business known for creativity.
I love that whole CEO whisperer. For anybody listening, if you are a CEO, if you are a founder, you get it right. It is a lonely, scary ass, super stressful world that really even your wife or your spouse or your partner, even they can't really fully relate, right? Like you're talking to them and you're trying to express, but and they're trying to be sympathetic and they're trying to be supportive, but even they don't get it, right? And you can't tell your employees everything. I mean, I've always tried to be as transparent as I can as a CEO, but there's some stuff you just can't share. It is a lonely world. And this is why CEOs start drinking too much and start doing the bad things. Because it's just
100%. And for many of them, the business that they may be thinking about selling, they're doing it because it's the right time in their life to do it. But it's like a child.
It is.
And the thought process of letting your child go, no matter how much money you may be getting paid, is a really, really hard process to go through. So that's why having this team of operators is, I believe, going to be critical in how we continue to scale our business.
I like it. I really like that a lot. Yeah, that's a great move. You said 10 to, what'd you say? The investment is 10 to 100 million usually. Is that what you're targeting? Okay. So what's your company target then? What's your revenue and EBITDA targets?
Yeah. So just to also be clear, we aren't really doing any of our own investing right now. We've done a couple little deals. We did a deal in the music space. We've co-invested in some of the deals, but everything is where companies are hiring us to go out and find the buyer or the capital.
Okay.
So we don't do startups. It's just, again, relating back to my days at Alchemy. It's not a world that we can really serve.
Okay.
So companies are going to have anywhere. I mean, they could have 5 million of revenue and going out for their Series A of 10, 15, 20 million dollars. We just recently were the advisor to a company out of Austria that sold to Cargill, and that was close to a 9-digit transaction. So it's going to range in terms of the amount of revenues, and companies don't have to be cash flow positive. I mean,
they don't have to be cash flow positive, but they do have to be established with revenue, and
yes.
It can't be an idea with a PowerPoint.
Yeah, I mean that's we're not the ones for you there, and we'll try to push them in a direction that could make more sense.
And do you push most of these companies towards family offices, angel money, PE, VC, banks, all the above?
Yeah, so we are institutionally focused. So while there has been a deal here or there where we had to probably tap into the high net worth market, we prefer not to. So our world is it's strategic acquirers as well as investors. Many corporations have actually set up formal investment platforms, companies like Hearst Ventures as an example.
Okay.
All the strategics, private equity, growth capital, VC, family offices, but it all is going to come down to, obviously industry expertise and interest, and then what is the right alignment with what our client is trying to achieve. And there are, you'll have some that will just say, look, I don't want private equity or VC. I want family office because they'll tend to have a longer term time frame. So you have to kind of mix and match depending on what your client is looking for.
I know if you were asking me at Riderflex, if we were about to take on cash, I would take a family office before PE, just based on everything I know.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, very good. And what's your business model? Do you take a piece of the money raised? Do you take a piece of equity in the company? All the above? What's your model? How are you making money?
So the typical engagement for us is a monthly retainer, and then we get paid success fees on the deal. And success fees will either be based on the amount of capital that's raised and type of capital. So, you'll get paid more on equity than you would debt. It could be based on, if it's a sell-side engagement, it's a percentage of the enterprise value. For investment banking mandates, we do not ask for equity. I've always been puzzled on how an investment bank justifies asking for equity when really all you're doing is managing a financial transaction. There's nothing you're doing operationally to boost the value of the business.
Good point. That's a great point.
Now, our operating guys, we will get equity with them if they're stepping in a role for a company as an outsourced C-level individual.
I see. Okay, very good. How many companies knock on your door and say, Andy, help me find cash? And what percentage do you say, no?
Yeah, so it is like most, this is a very relationship driven business. So, our deal flow is going to come from, years long relationships where, we've built trust and have, known people that either is the client or somebody that's referring a deal to us. And then the other way is expertise. If you do a deal in an industry, you do one deal, you get noticed. You do two deals, you're an expert. And so, we have several industries where, we've got, really strong deal backgrounds and history. So, it's hard to see. I'm not even sure. Because I don't necessarily see all the deals that our guys see, but it's, we have a pretty significant amount of deal flow.
Now you're doing, just to be clear, layman's terms here, if I wanted to sell or merge, you could help me do that. Or if I just wanted to raise cash, either way, you're doing it. Okay. And are you doing the implementation of the merger? Like, are you sticking around? Are you like, no, I'm just going to ink the deal. You sign it. You guys are merged. Okay, good luck. Or do you send in your troops to do some transitional work there after companies merge?
So to date, everything that we do finishes at the point when the deal is consummated and dollars have exchanged hands.
Well, you could use that whisperer could hang around and make sure people get along and play nice in the sandbox.
So it actually is a great example where, we could have somebody that could stay and help with implementation, if needed. If you look at the level, we have the former CEO of Gymboree. We have the former president and CEO of Discovery Network, the former CFO of Feld Entertainment. Like, these are real people that bring significant experience. And it actually, in my meetings in London, I'm meeting with smaller private equity groups over there to talk to them about utilizing this operating team to help a portfolio company expand into the US. So instead of throw a lot of money, open an office, have to go out and, utilize our team, leverage the relationships for business, and then leverage the talent network. And then also, if they need to raise capital from US investors or they want to sell and it's a likely US buyer, engage a team like us, because up to this point, they talk to Goldman Sachs and others. Goldman's never going to touch the deals that we're talking about.
Yeah. Why, what's the London connection? Why are you focused over there? What's driving that?
So, I developed a network there, starting with my Alchemy days, had several investors over there, have had deals that we've worked on out of London. And in sports media and entertainment, you can argue that there are a couple of hubs in the world that everything goes through, and London is one of those hubs. But also, it's a little bit of a differentiator, because even if I sit here and talk about this idea of what I'm doing with private equity groups, our peer groups aren't going to all of a sudden just pick up and start going to London and start pitching the same thing. It just, this is 8 years of relationships that I've built that have finally gotten us to this point.
You've mentioned relationships a few times in this conversation. I just want to share with the listeners, networking and relationships, it's just so critical. We just signed a new agreement here at Riderflex. I have known that guy for 25 years. 25 years
Yeah.
that I've known this guy, and he, you know, he watches our social media, and so he knows what we do, and he had a need and he reached out. And I just tell my team, I'm like, you know, I just can't emphasize it enough. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how high your IQ is. I don't care what your skill set is. If you're an asshole and you don't have good people skills and you don't network and you don't build relationships, you're not going to be successful. Period.
So, and the other thing I add to that is I read a book years ago by Keith Ferrazzi called Never Eat Alone. Again, another game-changing book for me. And at the heart of that book, it's generosity of your network. And I think what people need to understand is that every introduction doesn't need to be a transaction. If I make an intro to you and you get engaged and you successfully place somebody, you're going to think well of me, and that client is going to think well of me, and you've just built up some relationship currency. And
bingo.
Right? You never know when it's going to come back, but inevitably, if you operate day to day like that, it will come back. Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more. And that, to take that just one step further and wrap that up is just do the right thing, be nice to people, help people, make introductions. It's going to come back your way. Guarantee it. Here's a perfect example of that. C-level candidates that are in a transition will often call me and say, so at Riderflex, our business model is companies hire us to place talent. We're not candidate services, right? We don't get a C-level person and they pay us. The company's paying us. But C-level candidates that know me from my past, or they see us, they'll call me and they'll say, hey, I'm in a transition. I just want to talk. Can you give me some advice? What do you think about this? What do you think about that? I always take those phone calls. Do I get paid for those? No. Do I, is that part of our business model? No. But those are relationships that, guess what? 9 months later, that CEO gets a job somewhere and he's like, hey, Steve, I need talent over here. I mean, you just do the right thing. It's another example. Just build relationships. Very good. Okay.
Just a quick funny story on that. Living in Richmond, there was one individual who worked at a hedge fund who never returned calls. And a good friend and I, we were having a beer one night, and I said, one day he's going to need us. Yeah. And the call's not going to come back. And sure enough, all of a sudden, all this outbound networking, because he was in transition, and people wouldn't call him back. So, I mean,
there you go.
It's real what you just discussed.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this. I know we're getting close to the back end. I want to ask you to give us some advice here to entrepreneurs. So you talk to I'll call it small to medium-sized business owners all the time, right? I mean, all the time. You see startup founders, you've seen it all. You've seen a shit ton at this point. If you were to give, and I know we could do a whole podcast episode on this question, but if you could give 2 or 3 pieces of advice to some co-founders thinking that they are ready to raise some cash because they want to scale and they want to go from what I would call lifestyle business to a growth business and maybe sell it someday. They're okay. Yeah, we have this little family business. It's cool. That's great. But I want to take it to the next level. I want to go from 5 million to 50 million and flip this. And so we need some cash to do it. How would you start the conversation with them? What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, first, I think what I would say is make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. If you're sitting here saying, I want to scale this because I want to sell it, that's okay. But between the point of raising the money and selling it is going to take an effort that if your only reason for doing this is that end sale, is going to make that process much more challenging. So I think, you've got to be doing it for the right reasons. And ultimately, if your reasons are, you want to expand because you see market opportunity, you're able to, provide jobs to people and, be a force for good in the community. And the end result happens to be a successful organization that gets sold, is a much smoother path than if what you're solely set out to do is start, scale, sell. It will be a much bumpier process. I think the second thing I would say is surround yourself with people that aren't yes people. Surround yourself with people that are willing to challenge your thoughts, your beliefs, your views. Seek out people that have been through it. So, back to this role of, I find your own CEO whisperers and learn from them about what they did right, what they did wrong, and then learn how to apply that to whatever process that you might be going through. And I think the final thing is valuation is important, but it shouldn't be the defining reason for why you do a deal with somebody.
Okay.
Because I can argue that there are deals that might close at a higher valuation, but where there is an absolute personality clash between the team and the investors versus, so focus on personality match and culture match and less on the ultimate valuation.
Great point. Great tip. Couldn't agree more. I want to add to this. We'll wrap this one up, and then I'll ask you one more question. I know we're almost out of time. I'll share my own kind of story with this from lifestyle to growth, right? So before Riderflex, I was the CEO of a couple of different companies, and then starting Riderflex at first, I wanted to have a recruiting firm, wanted it to be remote, and I wanted it to just be something I could do as I got older, right? And so I the whole time I was thinking, this is a lifestyle business, and then it started growing. And then, this year we'll do a little over 2 million in revenue. And so now, of course, I visit with startup people and folks like you all the time. So now I'm like, okay, maybe it's time maybe we should take out some cash and just go for it and grab, do some mergers and acquisitions, grab a couple of other recruiting firms and flip this thing to Korn Ferry and blah, 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 blah. Right? Anyway, I'm at dinner with one of the best advisory board members we have. He's a great guy. He runs a family office in Denver. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, you're living a good life. You're going camping when you want in the mountains of Colorado. You're finally making a decent salary. Your firm's doing fine. He's like, what's wrong with just doing what you're doing?
Yeah.
And the point I'm making there for the listeners is, I know we all watch these movies and you see the internet, right? Where the startup founders started a business and they flipped it and they all made millions of dollars. That is a very, very, very tiny percentage of people. And it is okay if you're listening to this podcast and you just have a little business that's a family business and it's kicking you off a couple $100,000 a year and your life's good. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And again, there's the balance. I mean, it's okay to have aspirations,
sure,
to grow out of a lifestyle business, but just make sure the aspirations are attainable. Yeah. And that's where I go back to, if it's just about the sale, I would argue that your aspirations are going to be very challenging. Doesn't mean you won't achieve them, but they'll be very challenging.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Great stuff, Andy. Last question here. I asked this to a lot of people. So you're 52. Life's been pretty good. You've had a great career. Your boys are getting older now. If you had to define Andy's core purpose in life now, like moving forward, a couple of sentences, Andy's overall core purpose at this stage, how would you define that?
So I think a big part of it is, it's kind of a weird age, right? You're looking back at a fair amount and still have a lot of runway ahead of you. Mm-hmm. And I think it's natural that you start to think about, like, okay, how would I approach this differently? I think, one, I want to treat myself a little bit better. And I don't mean by, I work out every day, but I want to be less hard on myself. I need to take a step back and actually enjoy the process and everything that's going on.
That's important.
I want to be involved in the community. I've been trying to get the Sandlot Initiative launched for 4.5 years right now, which is going to focus on bringing baseball back to inner city communities.
Love it.
So I think it's things like that just candidly just be a better person, and seek out experiences as opposed to things. And so I think people will tend to look outward, feeling like they need to make a change. And I think sometimes the best change you can make is when you're looking inward, because of the impact it's going to have on everyone around you. And so I think for me, my core purpose is figuring out what that person's going to be like, and hopefully have a really positive impact on my family, my friends, and the community.
Love it. One of the great quotes I've heard in the last few years is, I want my life to be dictated, I don't want my life to be dictated by material things. I want it to be dictated by the experiences I'm chasing, which is kind of what you said. I love it.
Well, and the final, the quote that I've, always thought about there is, no one ever sat on their deathbed and said, I wish I had worked more.
Right. Andy, thank you so much for being on the Riderflex podcast and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
No, Steve, thank you. Enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.